Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing.
Scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Everybody in YouTube, Rumble, and Pilled. I appreciate all you guys. Guys, you're going to be triggering all the haters. You're already putting donations in the chat, guys. This is going to get them upset. Every $10 donation takes the wings off of one debunker angel. Guys, right off the bat, what's going on? We are talking about wormholes tonight. Before we do that, I want to recap all of what has led to this point over the last couple weeks. The major breakthrough was Friedwart-Winterberg's polyhedral configurations for thermonuclear detonations. In his polyhedral thermonuclear detonations image, I'm going to pull it up right now, we found the secret. We found the orbs. Now, I did not think it was going to be this easy to figure out, but I mean, what the hell? That is way too close to what we're seeing in the MH370 videos. 3 orbs, perfect triangle configuration around a central mass, polyhedral configuration. So this is what blew me away was, I don't know what I was doing. I think I was just asking AI some random questions, trying to understand more about the polyhedral configuration. And then I saw this. Visser's key insight was the total integrated amount of null energy condition violating energy, the amount of negative energy, can be made arbitrarily small by optimizing the wormhole's geometry. For example, in his polyhedral wormhole models, polyhedral wormhole models? What? Exotic matter can be concentrated in a thin shell along the edges, reducing the total negative energy required. Guys, this is the big rub. This is the thing. Like, boom. What has Eric W. Davis been saying about wormholes? We can make a thin shell of negative energy. So the answer is geometry. Can you guess the geometry of a polyhedral wormhole? It's a flat mouth. So flat like that. And why it's called polyhedral is because you have your shape over here and it's connected to another shape over here. The fourth orb hypothesis, anybody? So to get to this point, we've realized there's a connection between nukes and let's call it gravity manipulation. And what that specific connection is the H-bomb, the hydrogen bomb, the fusion bomb. How have they been covering this up? They've been covering it up because they figured out fusion. They figured out real fusion. And to figure fusion out, you have to understand 0-point energy. So they understood that how to produce fusion from the fusion bombs. And here's the secret I'm going to tell you right now. The secret is the geometry, it's the shapes, it's the sacred geometry, if you want to call it that. They understand the underlying geometry of the universe at the Planck scale, at the macroscopic scale, at every scale. The MH370 videos are telling us that the people who rule us understand something fundamental about the nature of reality itself. And that geometry, the spinning that they're doing around the plane, that the orbs are doing, is tapping into the underlying framework of the quantum scale. My guess is that the same triangle that we're seeing at the macroscopic level is also what you see at the tiny level, at the small level. But more to come on that front. So what we've been revealing is actually thermonuclear secrets. And the final rub is they've produced aneutronic weaponry. Aneutronic. I didn't know what any of this shit meant a few days ago. Now I know what it all means. Aneutronic means that the thermonuclear reaction is not producing the damaging stuff like the heat, the radiation. It's aneutronic, meaning the energy is going into gravitational potential. It's going into space-time manipulation. That's the reason why we have this huge plane blipping out at this low energy requirement, this like small energy level. It's like plucking a guitar string and then the guitar string just reacts. That's fundamentally what they've figured out. It's not complicated. It's actually very simple. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. Okay. Before we do that, take a look at this. Guys, the letter to Ashton Forbes has to be accurate. Here you go.
Start with the tech.
Oops.
Foundation is not superconductivity. Superconductivity is a product of the technology. We have had this since the 1960s, and from that first day we have used it to make sure that no one else can have it. So let's start with the tech. The foundation is not superconductivity. Superconductivity is a product of the technology. We have had this since the 1960s, and from that first day we have used it to make sure that no one else can have it.
We've had this since the 1960s, and from that first day, we used it to make sure that nobody else can have it. That nobody else can have it. What did we have since the 1960s? H-bomb. We had the H-bomb since the 1960s, the fusion bomb. That letter is right. It's correct about the low energy phase transition as well. It's correct about superconductivity being a byproduct of the technology. If you make your plasma extremely dense, it becomes superconductive. Dense plasma focus. This is what, I mean, the only way that letter has to be real. How could it have guessed all the science that we're just now figuring out right now? And then the letter says, I've memorized this part, sacred geometry. Doesn't that remind you of something? Doesn't sacred geometry remind you of something? It certainly reminds me of those orbs spinning around the plane. That certainly is some purpose that they're doing, dancing around the plane like that. They've figured out how to just pluck a string, bloop, and make something disappear. That is extremely scary technology. And it explains why Trump has said that we have weapons that nobody understands. I mean, I feel like I'm doing a lot of research to understand it, and I still can't understand it. So tonight, hopefully, we're going to figure out a little bit more about it. DeVos, wow. I will address some of this before we dig into it. Ross, Deep State Cohort, suddenly thinks the Tic Tac was Lockheed Martin technology. Full-blown panic mode. You've exposed them. Yeah, what a 180. These guys are all people I'm talking to at the convention just a few weeks ago, like going, there's no way we've reverse engineered any of the technology. And I'm going, you might want to check again. You might want to check again. And now I'm blowing up Lockheed Martin's spot, and now everybody's going, oh yeah, Lockheed Martin, it's yeah, that was, yeah, of course it's that Tic Tac thing was Lockheed Martin's technology. Go back, go search my posts for Lockheed Martin. Go search my posts for Lockheed Martin. I've been calling this out pretty strongly for the last year, including pretty harshly recently, including pretty harshly with their whole compact fusion reactor thing, with their coherent matter wave beam patent. I mean, how much more do I have to call them out? Lockheed Martin, their compact fusion reactor. Sorry, guys. Compact fusion reactor has been canceled. Where is it? Here it is. We found it. Turns out 2023, Lockheed Martin finally makes an announcement about this fusion reactor they've been working on for like 15 years or something like that. They go, yeah, just kidding. We're just going to confirm that 3 years ago, we just made a decision to stop doing it. What do you mean you just made a decision to stop doing it? Nobody in fusion stops. There's nobody in the fusion that's like, okay, we're done. We've given up. That doesn't happen. All these people are running these fusion companies that have produced nothing, and they just keep doing it. So you're telling me Lockheed Martin, who has basically unlimited money, they get that money from the government directly. They can do whatever the hell they want. They had a magnetic bottle that was 2,000 times more efficient than the public. This is just them quoting themselves. And they just decided this wasn't worth following up on. The potential for unlimited green energy for the whole world forever wasn't worth following up on. Yeah, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it, especially because I'm watching their fusion reactor fly around in the sky, spinning around MH370. Now, why am I so convinced that it's Lockheed Martin? Why am I so convinced that what is? Because I know exactly what the orbs are now. I know exactly what the orbs are now. I didn't think I would be able to learn what the orbs are, but if you've been following along, you've learned what the orbs are too. We know those orbs are a compact fusion reactor that's an air-breathing magnetohydrodynamic system. There's a plasmoid inside there that's shooting jets out either side. They use those jets as propulsion. Have you guys seen the neutron stars where they have those huge beams of rays and they say, if that neutron star hits you or whatever, that quasar hits you, that beam of light will vaporize anything in its way? That's the same beam that they're using at the tiny scale. That's what they're using for propulsion. So if you want to know more about that, come check out Wednesday's live stream, because Wednesday's live stream, I found a number of video presentations by Eric Lerner, and he goes through all the fusion companies, why the certain people's stuff works, why the ones doesn't work, who's the best, et cetera, et cetera. It includes Peter Thiel's company, Helion Fusion, as well. Yeah. So check that out on Wednesday. The other drama thing that I saw was this thing about David Adair, I've never heard of him before. Here's a video clip of him. I mean, people say, oh, how have you never heard of so-and-so? Guys, I don't know anything about the community, the lore of the UFO community. I learn as I go, but I've maybe heard this guy's name, but I didn't know his story. So here you go. Here's his deal.
One different rocket engines of propulsion systems that you could leave this planet with. Two of them are just a solid and liquid fuel. I happen to just pick one out of the other 61 engines to pick from, and I manufactured a magnetic fusion containment engine, which
a what? Did he just say a magnetically contained fusion engine? Yeah, that's relevant to my interest. You just said the magic words, my friend. You just said the magic words.
In simple essence, it's able to create a magnetic field capable of holding a thermal fusion reaction inside, like a chunk of the sun contained in a magnetic bottle. And when you tap that power, it allows you to have tremendous thrust, which is what makes the rocket go forward.
So people don't understand why. Let me just close this. They don't understand why it can produce thrust. It actually produced thrust naturally. In fact, the thrust was the problem. The problem when they do the field reverse configuration on the plasma is that it produces a natural jet of exhaust out of it. And you go, you can try to battle it and you can try to force it back on itself. But the answer is don't fight nature. Don't fight nature. Let nature do what it's going to do. So what they did was they said, oh, if we're going to have this beam, this star shooting a beam out of it, then what are we going to do? Use it for propulsion. Use it for propulsion. That's what they're doing. Somebody in my replies earlier said too that no, you couldn't do this because the electrons would be moving too quickly. They'd be moving too quickly. You can't control them. They have that solved too. Guys, just read the scientific papers. It's actually insane how all of the answers are just in there. What they're doing with the shock wave, like when the orb is moving forward, this forces the electrons into a highway where it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And what this does is it slows them down naturally, forces them to slow down. So actually, when they're compressing these electrons down into this tube that they have, it actually slows the electrons. They're turning that thing into an particle accelerator / decelerator. So they can control the flow of the electrons, therefore they can control the propulsion. It's actually just straight up incredible. The last thing I'll say before we jump into this, we got a lot to go over tonight, is that somebody says, well, Edward Teller would have won Nobel Prizes if he had found out that the fusion bomb was connected to 0-point energy or whatever. Do you guys understand how many Nobel Prizes the orbs represent? The MH370 orbs represent like, I don't know, a dozen Nobel Prizes. Yes, people are literally giving up Nobel Prizes to protect national security. In fact, I was just watching this other clip earlier where this guy is saying that so-and-so won the Nobel Prize in 2011 for dark energy. What the fuck are you talking about? You won the Nobel Prize for dark energy. Dark energy is not real. It's just a made-up fucking word. It doesn't actually mean anything. Dark energy means we don't understand how the universe expanded the way that it did, so we're just going to make something up. And literally, you'll literally hear brainwash NPC physicists go, that's the point of the Nobel Prize, is not knowing. No, that's definitely not the point of science. That's not the point of physics. That's not the point of the Nobel Prize. Not understanding something is not how science works. It's actually the exact opposite. When you don't understand how something works, that's when you throw out the theories that don't work based on that. And you come up with a new theory. You don't go, hey, we discovered that our view of cosmology is objectively wrong. Let's give somebody the Nobel Prize and just cover it up. Put a patch on that. Holy crap. Honestly, you might know what? Maybe I will take a Nobel Prize if we're just handing them out for making up dark energy, making up dark matter, basically just making up fake words for our lack of understanding of how the universe works. Okay. So let's start here. We're going to go quickly through this presentation I found by John Kramer, guys. And then we're going to flip over because I want to go over Woodward more. So Woodward's deeper into, well, Woodward gets a shout out here. So this is John Kramer, Exotic Path to the Stars. Shout out to the Quantum Institute here, guys. Give them a subscribe or whatever. We're going to skip through some of this, but I'm going to just do the highlights.
But he also has a day job. Starship Symposium, I was given the responsibility of doing the exotic paths to the stars, basically exotic physics. Exotic here means that you need at least one visit from the Tooth Fairy in order for the thing to work. Let me start by, let's see, how do you make this thing go?
One thing I want to say, too, from watching this is that I'm not sure John Kramer really knows, actually. It's actually possible that some of these authors, the nerds, like just contributed to this without even understanding what their contributions did. The reason why I say that is at the end, we're not going to go through the Q&A, but people were asking just normal Q&A like questions that even I could have answered. And he was like kind of giving weird answers where like really made me think like he doesn't really think this is possible. So anyway.
Where do you click?
There.
There's the keyboard. Okay.
I want to skip ahead a few minutes here.
Space drive. It involved sending little weights around in various ways in peculiar orbits. And I even spent some time in my uncle's machine shop trying to build a working model of it. But I spent.
Okay, so long story short, we know the basics. You guys have been around for a while. So what do wormholes require? Exotic matter, exotic physics. All it requires is negative energy. Negative energy. Negative energy is just tapping into space-time itself. We are at the ground state. That means there's something below us. And this is what they covered up. This is what they hid. This is why fusion works and why they figured fusion out while nobody else can figure it out, is because they've lied to us and had us believe that space-time's an empty vacuum. When you realize there's this unlimited energy in space-time, fusion becomes trivial. Well, maybe not trivial is the right word, but easier.
A considerable effort when I was in.
Okay, so let's skip ahead.
The second things, there are some approaches which seem to get around this by using other exotic that come out of general relativity. For instance, cosmic strings. Matt Visser has a species of wormhole that is held open by having a cosmic string of negative string tension in the middle of the wormhole mouth, pushing it out while the wormhole tries to collapse in some sort of delicate balance. So I guess I'm not sure that counts as one or two visits from the Tooth Fairy, but at least
a delicate balance that keeps it open. Now that is very interesting. That is very interesting. The MH370 wormhole is not open for very long, but it's open for like 0.1 seconds. So I'm trying to figure out when the orbs are converging on the plane. Is there a thermonuclear reaction that's occurring? Are they using the lithium as a catalyst? I asked AI about this, and AI said that basically it could be using the lithium as a catalyst without destroying the plane, which seemed impossible to me. But apparently because it's an aneutronic reaction, it is possible for that to be the case. But what I really think is happening is that somehow those orbs, when they converge, are creating a bubble around the plane. And that's what I think was described right there by Matt Visser, is that they're able to keep this wormhole open, keep this shell of negative energy there for just long enough for the plane to disappear, which really means it takes almost no time at all, right? Someone says DT in there. Yep.
That it seems to be a possible solution. Okay, and the other thing I wanted to say is that at my request, we got one of the theorists who have been working in this area sort of as critics. The basic idea here is that general relativity seems to allow you to do all kinds of weird things involving wormholes and warp drives and faster than light and creating space and annihilating space and so forth. And the question is, can you really get away with this? Is nature really going to allow you to do that? And some people have thought that probably the thing that would stop you from using general relativity in those ways is that a theory that we really only know the name of at the moment, quantum gravity, might come in and prevent this kind of abuse of general relativity by stopping you from doing these things. And so they have used this as a way of trying to get some purchase on quantum gravity itself, and they've made some progress. Basically, the approach I've been using so far is to use quantum field theory to to provide sort of limiting conditions for certain things that you might want to do with general relativity.
Okay. So it's amazing. John Kramer actually takes, he didn't really impress me that much with this because it wasn't a lot of new information. I thought his last presentation, the 15-minute one, randomly sitting next talking to the guy, was a lot better than this. Actually, a lot of what he talks about here, we've already spoken to. So there are different types of wormholes that can be designed. That was something I didn't know either, guys. So first thing you need to know about humanly traversable wormholes, there are different kinds of wormholes. So we are specifically focused in the polyhedral wormhole. Here's the big thing that Visser found out. Visser found out that when we produce a wormhole, you're not going through a tunnel. The observer doesn't see anything at all. The simplest way to reduce the negative energy requirement is have the throat be flat. Have the throat be flat. If the throat is flat like this, then when you go through one side, you appear on the other, which means the amount of negative energy you need is tiny. You only need this tiny little bit of negative energy to keep this wormhole open just for a brief second, and that's it. Because when the person goes through one side, they come out the other side instantaneously. If that seems weird to you and seems simple to you, well, there you go. You guys are now wormhole specialists at this point. I've deputized you. That's really all it is. And when they're trying to create these polyhedral wormholes, this is why they're creating a flat surface. They're creating a flat surface because that thing is not going to go through a tunnel. They're stitching together 2 points in space-time. And that thing is going through one side and appearing on the other. Pretty wild. Now, let's move up to like 8 minutes here.
So, with other people who have done calculations about wormholes, that there is some way of producing stable wormholes. And I wanted to talk, and then I want to look at a little bit at the implications of this for interstellar travel. Basically, this is an end run in which I'm trying to get around the the massive problems that we've been hearing about all morning of building massive spaceships that cost trillions of dollars. And it solves another interesting problem as well. Almost all of these approaches, at least all of them that I know about, even if you went to the stars, you couldn't come back because it would take so long that you wouldn't be able to return home in a reasonable time.
Okay, guys. Next thing that we're going to learn about wormholes. If you go through a wormhole, can you come back? What do you guys think? Put your thoughts down here in the chat. If you go through a wormhole, are you going to be able to come back? What does that mean for time, right? Use what we have learned from our physics experiments and put your theories down here in the chat, guys. Let's see what John Kramer says.
Human lifetimes are involved, and even if you use relativistic time dilation, you can't go back. The technique I'm going to talk about, you can go home anytime you want. So let's continue.
You can go home anytime you want, he says.
This is an early attempt at wormhole physics by Hieronymus Bosch. We see that various people are being transported through the wormhole to the other side and arriving in heaven. Presumably, there's another wormhole that goes in the other direction around someplace, but Bosch didn't show us that in this particular painting, which is called the Ascent of the Blessed, and it's in the Palace of the Doge in Venice, Italy. More recently, Albert Einstein and his colleague Nathan Rosen published a paper in 1935, and this was the original, this was the initiation of the idea of wormholes. Basically, what Einstein...
1935, the Einstein and Rosen bridge. This was the beginning of the theory of wormholes. When people say that we have to rewrite physics, no. You need to work on your physics. I'm working with purely Einstein physics. Einstein agrees that wormholes exist. Why? Because he wrote the first paper about them in 1935 with Rosen. There it is, right there. Because Einstein realized when he started looking at his equations that you can manipulate space-time. This is one of those things where people say, well, what about the alien ships that people saw in the 40s or the 50s? Well, guys, Einstein goes all the way back to the 1910s. The physics has been available for a very, very, very long time. Now, I'm not here to tell you aliens don't exist. Actually, I think they must exist, especially if we can teleport. If wormholes exist, aliens definitely exist. In fact, we're probably the aliens ourselves. Hopefully that makes you feel better.
Einstein and Rosen were trying to do was to understand what fundamental particles are. And they proposed that a fundamental particle might look something like this, that you have a wormhole in space that has electric lines of flux going through it. And the end of the wormhole where the lines of flux go in looks like a negative electric charge. And the end of the wormhole where the electric flux lines come out looks like a positive charge. And so they hypothesized that, for example, electrons and positrons might be just ends of wormholes with electric flux lines threading through them.
Holy shit. This right here is connecting the idea of a wormhole to positive and negative electric charge. Right there. Saying, what if a wormhole is just a connection of a positron and an electron between two different points? I didn't realize that people were already connecting the idea of electromagnetic wormholes all the way back with Einstein and Rosen. I thought that was a relatively new phenomenon. Guys, I've been saying that I think we're looking at a magnetic wormhole. Magnetism and electricity, the electric and magnetic fields have a duality related to them. I mean, wow. That's why I posted this last night when I was watching it. I'm going, whoa, okay, we're definitely on the right track. I mean, It's definitely all about the universe being electromagnetic. And what else is electromagnetic? The 0-point energy. The 0-point energy is electromagnetic, isn't it? Oh, physics, you son of a bee.
Later, John Wheeler and one of his colleagues calculated, first of all, the mass that this would have to have. It turns out that this is not going to be a mass of an electron. It's going to be something in excess of a Planck mass. And secondly, that it would be, this is basically unstable, and it would close up so rapidly that you wouldn't be able to even shoot one photon through it if it spontaneously opened up before it closed.
It would not be stable, and it would close up so rapidly you would not be able to shoot even one photon through it.
Closed again. That was somewhat the end of the story. But people continued to think about this, and it became known as an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Later on, John Wheeler rechristened Einstein-Rosen bridges and called them wormholes, and this terminology has become standard. However, my knowledge.
Wheeler is the guy that called them wormholes, guys. John Archibald Wheeler is the guy that called them wormholes. John Archibald Wheeler also helped develop the H-bomb. Should I repeat that? John Archibald Wheeler coined the term black hole and wormhole, and he also helped develop the hydrogen bomb, also known as the fusion bomb. Okay.
My science fiction novel, Einstein's Bridge, goes back to the older terminology and refers to these things. Okay, this brings us to 1988, when the whole idea of wormholes was reinvestigated by Kip Thorne and his group. Basically, I guess what happened here was that Carl Sagan had a big book contract for writing a science fiction novel, and he was fishing for a plot, and he wanted to use wormholes in order to do it. So he went to Kip Thorne and said, "Well, what about this thing of wormholes? What about these Einstein-Rosen bridges?"
So Morris Thorne and Utzver, I'm going to butcher his last name. When the movie Contact came around, Carl Sagan told them to research this, and they came out and they actually made significant advancements in the idea of wormhole physics. So this was 1988.
Is there any way of using those for interstellar travel? And Thorne told him that they were unstable, it had been demonstrated, and so forth. And then he got to thinking about it, and he decided that this hadn't been investigated enough. And so he said one of his brighter students, Mike Morris, to look into it. And they concluded that, yes, you could stabilize wormholes under certain conditions. And they came up with
concluded you can stabilize a wormhole.
The scheme involving using the Casimir effect in order to do it. And this is a quote particle that has mass m and charge q, whatever those happen to be.
Such an advanced technology could, by choice, keep a stabilized wormhole very small so that in the spirit of Einstein-Rosen, one mouth would behave like a charged particle mass and a charge of Q. Once again, connecting electromagnetism to the idea of a wormhole.
To be. Okay, now, the other thing that Kip Thorne and company demonstrated was that you can use such a wormhole to produce a time machine. And basically, the way you do it is by taking one mouth of the wormhole and putting it on board a relativistic spaceship. You'd have to build one of these things we were just hearing about from Adam, and that would approach.
Okay, so basically they found out about retrocausality. So the next thing they found out was if we start messing around with wormholes and teleportation, well, now you can actually create a situation where causality is violated, where we have a situation where something happened before the reaction. The reaction occurs before the cause. And that shouldn't be possible. So the next thing that they say is, okay, well, the smartest people come up and they say, maybe the universe is going to prevent that from happening. Maybe there will be some chronology protection that the universe comes into play.
One mouth of the wormhole on a relativistic spaceship so that it stays young. Okay, now Stephen Hawking had something to say about this. I found this on the internet and I couldn't resist using it. I apologize if anybody.
I will address a real quick question here. Do you see the ball lightning and video in Alberta? Yeah, I think I saw a little ball or whatever of light. I have no idea what it means. Sorry.
He's offended. Stephen Hawking had something to say about this. He said that he thought.
Why is it so quiet?
There were things in general relativity and quantum gravity that would forbid the advent of time-like loops such that you might get with a wormhole. Basically, he pointed out that there were certain formulas for quantum vacuum fluctuations which have in the denominator the interval, the space-time separation between two objects, such that when this interval goes to zero, you're dividing by zero and things blow up. And so he suggested that there was something called chronology protection, in which the quantum vacuum fluctuations, if you tried to make a wormhole become a time machine, would explode. The quantum vacuum fluctuations would explode exponentially and destroy the time machine and probably the physicist who was trying to make it.
So I think that's a really interesting thought. If that, I don't think it's exactly correct, but the idea that the 0 point fluctuations would forbid you from producing a causality error. So it's almost like the idea that you won't be allowed to make a wormhole if your wormhole is retrocausal. So maybe it's not going to blow up, but it's going to fall apart. So this would be more of like the idea of coherence versus decoherence. If you try to violate causality, then you're going to have your wave function fall apart or what have you. I don't know. So that's the thought around it. And I think it must be true. I think it must be true that you cannot go back in time. You cannot go change the past. Why? Because we would have been changing it and our universe would be shit. Now, you might argue our universe is shit, and maybe that's why. So that's why I don't rule it out entirely. That's why I don't rule it out entirely. But everything about our reality tells me that we can't go back in time, which would mean that we are limited to instant transmission. Now, there's still some weirdness around this where we just don't know the answer. Like, John Kramer will be the first person to tell you we need more experimental evidence to be able to determine whether or not this is actually true and accurate or not. Otherwise, maybe we can, and maybe we can create multiverses, and maybe it turns out that you make a new universe when you go back in time, and that's how you get around the whole problem. End of the day, we don't really know, but we do know that the majority of the scientists that researched this early on all shared this same belief that nature will prevent retrocausality. Nature will prevent going back in time. So last thing I'll say on this is that my thought and my view has been that this is the one thing I'm probably most likely to be wrong about out of everything, I feel like. But I agree that I think it's unlikely we'll be able to go back in time. Now, if I'm wrong, what that would mean is there's probably time wars that are happening right now. Time wars. If I'm wrong, if we can go back in time, then that's why the United States government's hiding this technology, is they're literally controlling the time stream, like the Marvel movies and shit. We have to control the time stream, make sure the time stream does not get violated, and be the time protectors. I really hope that's not the answer, because it seems really nerdy and lame. I'm kind of hoping for something a little bit weirder than that. But end of the day, I don't really care. I don't care what the answer is. This is probably a good time to do some donos, guys. Okay. Thank you, Chaotic Good, doing the happy dance. Appreciate you. 2019, I was first to bring Lockheed into this. Yeah, you definitely were not. No, you weren't. Lee's Weeham, PhD. Thank you very much for that donation. I appreciate it. Introspect. Discovery is greater than disclosure. Yeah, maybe. And I'm not too worried about disclosure. Disclosure is never going to happen, guys. If you were thinking that like the government's going to come out and admit that they've got alien crafts and that they gave them to Lockheed Martin and Lockheed Martin's been building magical technology, then you probably also thought they were going to give you the Epstein files, that Epstein file list was waiting on Pam Bondi's desk and she was about to hand it over to you to Fox News. I keep telling you guys, if you think there's a happy ending to this story, you have not been paying attention. This is why it's not about us pushing for disclosure. The government's never going to admit to this shit. It's just about us learning at the end of the day and us just putting their feet to the fire. It's about us just putting their feet to the fire. And now we have something even better than Gorgon's Stare. We had Edward Lin. Edward Lin, this guy dodged a bullet. This man is dodging bullets like I could never have believed. Edward Lin leaked thermonuclear secrets and teleportation to the world, and he only got 9 years in prison. How lucky do you have to be to leak those videos and only get 9 years in prison? And then some random healthcare guy finds you on the internet. Nobody has any idea what you did. finds you and starts blasting that you leaked these videos on the internet. Your life is ruined. Ruined. And then you get another blessing, and it turns out that that same investigator finds out it's Gorgon Stare, and now he doesn't need Edward Lynn anymore. In fact, Edward Lynn, people were just going to make up some bullshit about him anyway. Even after he came out and said that he was the guy that leaked the videos, that was never going to change the mind of the debunkers. They were never interested in the truth. Gorgon Stare was even better because Gorgon Stare, thousands of people have seen Gorgon Stare. Thousands. How many people do you see in my replies saying, I work for the U.S. Air Force and I've worked on Gorgon Stare and that's not Gorgon Stare? How many people do you see saying that? There would be nothing that would prevent people from saying that. Nothing would prevent people from saying that. And yet nobody is saying that anywhere in my replies. Even though the easiest way to get the right answer is to say the wrong thing on the internet, and not one person out of the thousands and thousands of people that seen Gorgon Stare. The reason being is that is Gorgon Stare. They're not allowed to say that because it would violate national security and their NDAs and whatever they've got. And that bailed Edward Lynn out. Edward Lynn gets the biggest break ever. And now Gorgon Stare isn't even important anymore because now we know what they're hiding. Now we know exactly what they're hiding. They're hiding efficient, compact fusion reactors that are working, not just working, but are flying around in the sky. They look like alien orbs, and they're able to teleport. And they figured out teleportation because they understand some cosmic, possibly quantum nature of reality itself. Not only do they understand it, they fucking engineered it. They have engineered it. They've engineered to the degree where they know whether or not retrocausality is real or not. Think about that. They know whether or not it's real or not. We don't, but they already know the answer because they saw when that plane came out on the other side. Now let's skip ahead to 20 minutes. This starts to get pretty good. Wormholes at the LHC. So this was actually, I think, the presentation. I think it was John Kramer that got everybody freaked out about wormholes and black holes at the LHC. I didn't even realize that it was John Kramer because he's the one in this presentation from 2013 where he starts talking about they're making wormholes at the LHC. A lot of people ask me, what about CERN? What about the Large Hadron Collider? Shouldn't it be finding this stuff? Yes, it should be. And it's not because the energy levels are not high enough. So the answer is they've figured out lasers that are more powerful than CERN, significantly more powerful than CERN. In fact, anybody talking about making a larger collider is a moron, is a complete idiot. Take away their PhD, take away all their credentials, put a dunce cap on them, put the makeup on them, and sign them up for the circus. No more colliders. No more $20 billion 100-mile circle collider. We need to be bigger and bigger and bigger. No. Start researching inertial confined fusion, field reverse configurations using plasmoids. Trust me. Thank me later.
Times 10 to the 7th coulombs per kilogram, which is the charge to mass ratio of a proton. Now, there might be some problem with doing this. That's a lot of charge if the proton is if the thing is fairly massive. But there were other ways of accelerating wormholes. The whole structure of the LHC, all of these superconducting magnets and things, are not really there to accelerate the protons. They're there to bend them in a circle so that some local electric fields can accelerate them over and over and over again until they get to the velocity you like in RF cavities. If you had the mastery of wormholes, you could build a very simple accelerator which could reach the same energies of the LHC by just having one wormhole mouth on one side of the RF cavity and the other on the other side, and just sending it through again and again and again. This would, for the purposes of accelerating wormholes, this is perhaps questionable because the question is whether one wormhole can pass through another. And I don't propose to, as Jim Binford said, that's a gnarly question, and I don't think I want to get into it right now. But anyway, this is a thought experiment in which we're accelerating a wormhole up to that. Okay, what can we do with it after we do that? Well, I want to introduce you to an idea you may have seen before called proper time. This is a term in special relativity.
Okay, so proper time. So now what he's going to describe is, okay, so we're not going to be retrocausal. We're not going to go to the past. But what about, are we going to the future? What about going to the future? So what's going to happen now if I go through a portal and now I'm at Alpha Centauri? Now I'm in Alpha Centauri or Proxima Centauri or one of the planets or whatever. And now I come back through. When I come back through, is it going to be 100 years later? Is it going to be 4 years later? How's that going to operate? So let's see. I think we skip ahead here.
As the clock is moving, and this is the wormhole. Okay, so NASA recently announced the discovery using the Kepler mission of one of these Goldilocks planets. It's called Kepler. It has the compelling name of Kepler 32e, and it's 1,200 light years from the Earth. So let us imagine that we had one of these accelerated wormholes and we wanted to use it to see what was going on in Kepler 32e. Okay, so we launch a wormhole from the super collider, pointing it in the right direction, and it travels at very nearly the speed of light. It travels 1 part in 7,455, roughly 1 part in 7,455 less than the speed of light. And so it would arrive, as far as our view through the wormhole is concerned.
Bro, John Kramer, does he not know where the microphone is? Why does it sound like this guy's walking away from the microphone? Bro, please learn how to present and talk into a microphone.
In just 59 subjective days. In other words, looking through the wormhole, we see it leave here and arrive there 59 days later, even though it's traveling.
Okay, so that was the important part. First of all, he's talking about shooting a wormhole through a particle accelerator at a distant point. Does that not sound familiar to you guys? That's exactly what we're seeing with the MH370 videos when they pinch on the plane and the plane gets shot away. He's saying we need to use our particle accelerator and then we're going to shoot our wormhole at distance. And even though it's 1,200 light years away, it'll get there in 59 days. What? Wow. So now we have the basis for exactly how the teleportation works. You send your fourth orb to the destination. Your fourth orb must be at the destination. You trigger the wormhole protocol. Wormhole opens up and you walk out on the other side. So basically, it's like a hypergate. You got to have a hypergate in your location that you need to go to. And we can do it, but it would take 59 days to shoot our wormhole 1,200 light years away. So we actually have to send something there. The good news is if we send it there at the speed of light, it gets there really, really, really quickly, as John Kramer is pointing out. 59 days is nothing. Not to get 1,200 light years away. That's nothing. So this opens the door to interstellar travel in a major way. There is some time delay that we have to wait. But once we have it set up, once we have our orbs in position, we're just teleporting there.
At nearly the speed of light for about 1,200 years. Okay, how can that be? Well, it's because the wormhole has become a time machine, and we're seeing we have now a time machine that connects the departure and the arrival in a very small time interval. Okay, now the question is, how could you point at that accurately? And the answer is you don't really have to, because due to back reaction, you can send momentum through the wormhole that can steer it in whatever direction you want. So you can have you can shoot electron beams through it, for example, or light beams. This
part's weird. He says that you can steer it while it's traveling. Steer it while it's traveling there. I mean, I guess, but okay, this part's a little beyond me. And he also points out about pointing it. Pointing it is so important. Why? You would think that if you're teleporting something, why do you have to point it? Why do you have to point it? Because it's electromagnetic. It's a magnetic wormhole. We're shooting it like a rail gun out there. So you have to point it. What are they doing in the MH370 videos? They're pointing the direction of the teleportation. That's why they're spinning around the plane vertically, because they know that thing's going backwards when they pinch on it. So a lot of connections here between what John Kramer is saying and the real physics that we're seeing in the videos.
Give it steering corrections on the way so that you can manipulate it mass. And this will cause the wormhole mouth to gain energy by back reaction. But this can be compensated by sending low velocity mass through in the other direction. The large charge can be reduced at the same time by sending charged particles through, or it can be maintained by sending particles of the same charge through. If you find a habitable planet there, the wormhole mouth can be brought to the surface, samples extracted, and ultimately you can expand it, sending robot precursors and planetary explorers and colonists and freight right on through.
Wow. Right there at the end. He's talking about send your fourth orb. Send your fourth orb to the planet. Have it scouted out. If you're good, the planet, the wormhole will open up. You send all your stuff through, and now all your equipment's on the planet. I got to say, chat, we have the greatest future ahead of us. We have the greatest future ahead of us. This is incredible.
And if the colonists don't like what they see in the other end, they can just step right back through the wormhole and they'll be back where they started without having to worry about having their colleagues having age.
And there you go. They can step right back through the wormhole and they're not going to have aged 1,000 years either. So you actually don't have to worry about going there and then coming back. Now, you would have to worry about it in one condition. Your rate of time is going to flow differently on the other planet. So the longer you're on that planet, your time is going to be based on, call it New Earth. If New Earth's gravity is twice as powerful, then your time is going to flow half the speed. Well, that's probably not exactly correct, but you get the point. Your time is going to flow slower than it would on Earth. So you're going to be, your rate of time will be flowing different. Remember, everybody's got a dial of time. And it's hard to know that until you start living on different planets. If different people were living on different planets, you would see people aging at different rates. From their perspective, it would seem normal. This is general relativity. That is general relativity. Okay. So let's see. Get off there. Here we go.
In time that is slightly less than its distance in space by 1 part in 7,455.
Wait, I think I screwed up. I wanted to go back a little bit more. Here we
go. Having their colleagues having aged by thousands of years while they were gone. What about chronology protection? Well, let's assume Stephen Hawking was correct and that wormholes are prevented from becoming time machines by the equations of general relativity and quantum gravity. What about this for our starships? Well, the wormhole link has a space-like time separation. And what we mean by this is that it spans a distance in time that is slightly less than its distance in space by 1 part in 7,455. And therefore, it does not represent a time-like loop, and it does not offer the possibility of producing a time bomb explosion of vacuum fluctuations.
What he's saying right there, for the people who didn't understand that part, he's saying that we've engineered it so that the distance will never be less than the time. So you're never going to appear before you left. And he says, as long as we engineer it that way, so there's always a slight delay, we're never making our teleportation faster than instantaneous. In fact, it'll always be a little bit slower than instantaneous transmission. It'll always be a little bit slower than instantaneous transmission. That's how you get around the issue of the time paradox and the time bomb explosion thing. And this to me is really big. This is really big to me. Why would John Kramer be saying this repeatedly now? We've heard multiple interviews where he talks about engineering out the retrocausality, engineer out the backwards in time travel, because, and he keeps saying that the prominent physicists did not believe that it was possible. So he says, engineer that part out. Engineer that part out. To me, that's giving away the game. They're saying, we know you can't go back in time, so we've literally engineered it out, and now we figured out instantaneous teleportation transmission without retrocausal implications, without paradoxes. So, what have we learned so far? We've learned polyhedral wormholes based on geometry, based on electromagnetism, must have an endpoint and a receiving point. It's not going back in time. It's the fastest it could be is instantaneous transmission between 2 points, and we need to send one half of our wormhole, our fourth orb, to the destination. To the destination. And all of this is consistent with the MH370 videos as well, and what we see in those videos.
The problem might arise, however, if you establish the colony at another star, and then you try to do this again, providing another wormhole link. In that case, you might very well produce a time.
So here's the other part, and I've spoken about this because people have brought this up, and they said, here's the workaround. What if you make two wormholes? What if you have two wormholes and their distance differs? Then you should, in theory, be able to create a time-like loop that causes retrocausality. And this is where John Kramer says, he gets asked about this in the comments that we're not going to have time for here tonight. He gets asked about this and basically says that one of the two wormholes is going to collapse. It's going to fall apart. This is actually where I think that you can't potentially have permanent stargates. This would prevent you from having a permanent stargate, a permanent open gate between 2 points, because you could get retrocausality from that. So that's why I think it may be a situation where in order to produce a wormhole, it has to be a one-time blip. It can't be an open door that you're just watching that's permanently open. It has to be a one-time thing where bloop, you get sucked through, and then you have to make a new wormhole if you want to go back. Now, my guess is we're going to figure out how to make it better than that, but that's just my impression from what we've seen so far. He talks about the Fermi paradox here as well. Let's see, where was the Fermi paradox? Here we go.
In our direction this way. Well, if you look at the cosmic ray literature, there is things called Centauro events. And the Centauro event is peculiar because it seems to be a very highly charged, a very high velocity particle that doesn't seem to have any strong interactions. And as a matter of fact, if you ask yourself, what would a wormhole look like that was plowing through our atmosphere, would look like that. And so perhaps somebody is out there knocking at our door with fast wormholes and we haven't realized it yet. Okay.
So that was the last question. I think it just goes into questions after this. So I'm not going to watch that part. But the last part there he says is, what about the Fermi paradox? Why don't we see alien civilizations? Everybody says, well, it turns out there's these things called Centauro, or what are they called? Centauro events. And he's going, what if the aliens are sending the wormholes out there and we're seeing them as these like fast radio pulses or this Centauro event or some other thing? We don't even realize that they're wormholes. We don't even know what we're looking for. It's like if ancient cave people saw airplanes in the sky, they would be like, what's that metal bird in the sky? Right? They wouldn't even maybe know what metal is. They'd be like, what the hell is that demon in the sky? That's kind of where we're at. We're seeing these electromagnetic pulses, this stuff we don't understand in the universe that doesn't seem like it should have a natural origin. Maybe we are seeing the signs of aliens. They're just using technology we don't recognize at all. Using physics we don't really recognize at all either. So that's the first half of our wormhole, guys. Second half of our wormhole presentation for tonight is going over James Woodward, Mach principle from 2011. So these all predate the MH370 videos. Here's Mach principle. Here's the video link for the second one. I'll put these in the description as well for you guys.
Utterly idiotic amounts of negative.
Okay, so we're going to skip through. They say basically, since this is so old, this actually predates, like we're on the cutting edge of wormhole science right now. So for a lot of you guys, bringing up Casimir effect and negative energy and all this stuff, it probably seems like secondhand nature to you, especially if you've been following my content for a while. Negative energy is just the 0 point energy. It's been calculated to be practically infinite. So this is the first stuff that they dig into, is they have to get the normies up to speed on basic physics of geometry of the space-time, what a wormhole is, stuff like that you're seeing right here. So let's skip ahead into that. Okay, here we go. What does it take to do this stuff?
Okay, what does it take to do this? A Jupiter mass of negative rest mass matter. Okay, That's really basically what you've got to do. And what I want to talk about today, I'll tell you a little bit about the experimental work that I've been doing later on. But what I want to talk about today is this, because what often passes for conversation about this misses a point which I think is important. And just to remind you how much a Jupiter mass of matter is, it's 2 × 10⁻27 kilograms.
So if you've heard the source about it takes this Jupiter mass of negative energy to make a wormhole, you're hearing it right now. You guys think, what do you guys think in the chat? Do you think that we're going to need a Jupiter-sized mass of negative energy to produce a wormhole? Not if you've been following this case.
Grams of stuff, that's 600 times the mass of the Earth or something. It's a very large amount of mass. Okay. Is there any chance that this can be done? And especially using only low, and by low I mean the best we can possibly produce. They are all low. Energy.
Can it be done using low energy electromagnetic fields? Well, good sir, you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention. Can it be used using low energy electromagnetic fields?
Electromagnetic fields, because in this business, electromagnetic fields are pretty much what you're limited to. Steam's the other option, and steam.
What does that say? What does that say right there? That says yes.
Power isn't obviously. No. Okay, where do you get a Jupiter mass of exotic matter? Okay, remember this has to be rest mass matter, stuff that you can stop in the laboratory. Okay, not stuff that's zipping along at the speed of light. I suppose you could contain it in something or something like that. But rest mass matter is the stuff that Morris and Thorne were talking.
Chat, I just gotta say, I love this shit. I absolutely love this shit. I love physics. I love science. I love learning about this. And I love that it's all real and that I get to be the guy to expose all of it. What a time to be alive. And that's why when people say, aren't you scared they're going to kill you, Ashton? No, not at all. In fact, already, if this is how I go out, I've already so happy with how my life has gone out. Couldn't have imagined a better way for it to go out, frankly. In fact, I'm definitely going to Valhalla, if there is a Valhalla, just based on what I've already been able to expose from these douchebags as it is. So, nah, I got no regrets whatsoever. There you go. Oh, and also, I'm not suicidal. If anything happens to me, it's definitely foul play. I have no mental issues. I'm not going to ever harm myself under any circumstances. And all these psyops that people have been doing, including the Redditors sending my mom weird psychotic letters and shit like that, which really upset her, by the way. Like, really upset her that people were trying to do that. None of that has any impact on my psychological state whatsoever. So keep it up if you want. I don't really care.
Talking about the usual story, and when you see stuff on this topic on TV, what people usually talk about is by amplifying Planck scale wormholes, presumably quantum gravity, which doesn't exist yet. The theory doesn't exist yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do want to point out one thing as well. Where are all the debunkers on the Tim Pool interview with Dr. Yu? Where are all the physicists to correct all the misunderstandings from those? Huh? Like I said, they say that the quickest way to get the right answer is to say the wrong thing on the internet. That interview and the various clips have well over 1 million views. Well over. I don't see any of them debunking any of that stuff. Kind of amazing how all the haters start to just dry up once you start to get into the hard brass physics and science and the facts. And also that other guy, Daniel Whiteson, dodged the debate, even though supposedly he challenged me. Goes to show how they invert this stuff. They claim that you won't debate them, and then they run away. Anyway, just pointing out some interesting things.
Nonetheless suggests that space-time foam at the Planck scale occurs and that there are wormholes flitting into and out of existence at that scale and so forth. And the idea here, and this was, by the way, proposed by Thorne himself in his early papers on this, is that somehow you get really super small quantum tweezers and grab one of these Planck scale wormholes and then you stretch it out and amplify it, whatever that means, up to macroscopic dimensions. Oops, wrong way.
So amplification of a Planck scale wormhole. It seems crazy, but maybe it's not. Maybe the orbs are amplifying a Planck scale wormhole to the macroscopic level. I'd say I give this a probability of like 10 to 15%. But you know what? We want to come into this from an open-minded perspective. There's apparently a bunch of different kinds of wormholes and a bunch of different theories about how to produce them. And we should just be looking for what matches the evidence that we have visually. We know it's going to be a match because we're literally seeing the real deal.
Okay, here we go. Next one. Another suggestion that's been made is that there may be naturally occurring exotic matter, cosmic strings, remnants from the initial creation of the universe and stuff like that. And that if you motor around in deep space and identify some of this stuff and put your tractor beam on it and drag it around and so on, you might be able to do that. Okay. By figuring out how to transform normal matter into exotic matter. This may sound to you like the least likely, but, and I must admit, I didn't think it was very likely either.
Converting normal matter into exotic matter. Now that has piqued my interest. Why? Because a lot of these wormhole warp drive concepts are trying to use normal matter to produce exotic matter. Remember the positive energy warp drive solution from like 2 years ago or less? And Salvatore Pais's patents, high energy electromagnetic field generator. How does it produce the negative energy reaction? It produces a powerful EMP, basically a very powerful aneutronic reaction. Maybe not even a neutronic reaction. So when he's saying converting positive negative to negative energy, really what he's saying is pluck your string. Pluck your string on your guitar. If you pluck your string on your guitar, it's going to vibrate. So if you want to get a reaction, cause an action. And this is where even Woodward says this scene didn't make a lot of sense to him at first, and this makes me think that this is the real solution.
But I should point out, as Peter Maloney pointed out to me many years ago in a delightful conversation about all of this stuff, he said, you realize, of course, that in quantum electrodynamics, the bare masses of elementary particles are negative, and they're infinite. They have to be, because the renormalization program, in effect, adds positive infinite energy that dresses it down to a finite value. Okay?
Infinite energy.
That's this. Okay? The question is, how do you undress elementary particles? And in the standard view of the standard model of quantum mechanics, the answer to that is you don't. Okay? Because the fluctuation process that produces the cloud of virtual photons and electron-positron pairs is not something that you can manipulate using low-energy electromagnetic fields. Okay. The question then arises, and the reason why Maloney and I were talking about this many years ago was because I was interested at the time in the question.
Let me just read this so we don't get YouTube attacked. In the standard model, the bare masses of elementary particles are negative and infinite. I'm going to read that one more time. In the standard model, the bare masses of elementary particles are negative and infinite. How do you undress elementary particles? Is there a non-standard model that may help? The model that he gets into is something called ADM model. So ADM model and quantum gravity. It's Ashtekar. Ashtekar out of everybody. The moment he referenced Ashtekar, that was Ashtekar's paper. You can't really see it right there. Do you know where I remember the name Ashtekar from? Salvatore Pais's interview. So check out either interview 1, 2, or 3 with Salvatore Pais. I don't remember which one, but he mentions Ashtekar as well. So we're clearly on the right track here, because now it's Woodward describing wormholes using Ashtekar's paper. And they use this ADM model and does a bunch of math to basically show that it works. It says the ADM model kind of works, but it has some drawbacks. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me think if this, I want to hear him say the last part here. Let me see. Where does he say this? I think it's right here.
And what we know is that the bare mass should be negative. Okay. Or at least if you take the standard model seriously, it should be negative. The question is, what happens if you put in a negative bare mass in the ADM model? Okay, gravitation only enters as a local self-energy in the ADM model. That is to say, no account is taken of coupling to the distant matter in the universe. Okay, now, for reasons other than anything having to do with this, back at the time that I was fiddling around with this, it had already occurred to me that you needed to take Mach's principle seriously if you were going to get very far in advanced propulsion. Okay, there's an interesting thing about the ADM mass, however. It differs from the electron mass by almost exactly the square of the speed of light. It's to within 10%, which tells you something. Well, it may be just a coincidence and it may be a red herring, but there may be something there.
The ADM mass differs from the electron mass by almost exactly a factor of c squared. Now, that's pretty weird. What he's implying here is that this theory may have some weight because there seems to be some connection to the speed of light. And then he says, go ahead.
If you take Mach's principle seriously, what you discover is that the value of the total scalar gravitational potential is c squared, which suggests that maybe this has something to do with the ADM mass. Okay.
So now we're connecting this idea, and what he was saying is we need a model that connects gravity to electromagnetism. That's why he was looking at Ashtekar. He says, we need a model that connects gravity to electromagnetism. Well, guess what aneutronic reactions are doing, chat? In an aneutronic reaction, the energy goes as a gravitational potential. A gravitational potential. So when the orbs are converging on the plane, but all we see is this little flash of light, barely looks like anything, looks like flipping on a light switch. That's because most of the energy in the aneutronic reaction is going into the gravitational potential, not going into the actual interaction that's happening there locally. That gravitational potential is the ripple that we see when the plane zips out.
Okay. And that if you take into consideration Mach's principle, you might be able to get back a realistic value for the electron mass.
Okay, so now what I'm trying to figure out is he's about to show this equation that made no sense to me before. I'm going to try to figure it out right here in real time with you guys.
Okay. The bare mass should be negative, as I said. And what does all of this lead to? Well, if you're interested in finding out the details, I'll be happy to either point you to papers that I've already published, or if you like, I'll be happy to send you a mains principle be correct. That is to say that when the gravitational mass of an object is negative, its inertial mass has to be negative too. Okay. This is, by the way, a mistake that is made by actually some rather surprising folks. Okay. When you drop a negative bare mass object, when you drop a negative mass object,
so, and here, this is the fun part. If you drop a negative mass object, normie physicists think that it's going to go up into the sky. It's going to repel. A negative mass object will fall to the ground the same way that a positive mass object does. Negative mass doesn't quite work the way that people think in their heads. I mean, it does, but it also doesn't when you actually work through the physics itself. And that's what he's saying right here. So let's skip ahead a little bit.
Direction. Here we are. Okay. This is the total gravitational potential due to the universe, has a value of c squared up to some numerical factor of order unity. This is the potential due to the cloud of electrically charged dust. It has negative bare mass, so this is a negative potential. This is a positive potential. When you add those things together, they're both
this is why, because he's probably like pointing at something, but we just can't see it in the video.
Equal to about c squared. What you end up with is this thing dominating the denominator, and that gives you back the electron mass. Okay, up to factors of order unity to within 10% if you fudge all those order unity numbers the right way. Okay, if you could figure out how to suppress this, this would no longer be canceled in effect by an equal and opposite potential, and what you would end up with is this thing being of order unity, and you would end up with the ADM mass being exposed. The bare.
So what he's saying here, and I only know this because I skipped ahead and cheated a little bit, is this theta? I'm not good at my Greek symbols. The one with the circle with the line through it that has the U next to it, that one. He's saying if you can manipulate that, you can change this equation, and therefore you can change mass. You can actually flip mass around here. So now I actually understand what he's saying here. Phi. Okay, it's phi. Thank you for my Greek. Look at the Greek people in the chat. Look at this. Some of y'all been in frats and sororities, I can tell, chat. Okay, so if you take phi u, he's saying if you take phi u and manipulate it, you can flip the mass of the object around here. You can turn it negative. This opens the door to producing negative energy from positive energy. That's what this opens the door for. Boom, right there.
Mass of the elementary particles. And if you work out the algebra for arithmetic for this, what you discover is that if you have a sphere 30 meters in diameter, about a meter thick of normal stuff, and you figure out how to suppress this thing here, this thing turns it into a Jupiter mass of negative rest mass matter.
If you figure out how to suppress the phi u, you can turn whatever you need into a Jupiter-sized amount of negative energy. So what he's saying there is you can turn, by suppressing the phi u, you can actually create negative energy, because negative energy is just the inversion of positive energy. It's just about inversion. It's about duality, positive and minus, just like electric charge, just like a dipole. It's all about positive and minus electric charges. It always has been.
Okay, so in principle, if there's anything to this, and I emphasize if there's anything to this, in principle, you should be able to make Jupiter masses of negative rest mass matter to produce wormholes and warp drives and all the rest of that, okay, if this is right, okay? How do you do it? Well, by making phi sub u small or zero, okay? Can it be done?
Oh, phi or is it phi? Make phi sub mu 0. So how do we do that? Okay, now we're in it, chat. You guys now, hopefully everyone's paying attention now. Okay, so now we got to make phi sub u 0.
With low energy electromagnetic fields. How? That's where Mach's principle comes in. Okay. That, by the way, is Ernst Mach in his study, I believe it was around 1888 or thereabouts, in Vienna. Okay. What is Mach's principle? You push on something, it pushes back. Why? Well, people used to argue about this, but if you look at the physics of it, you can say the gravitational action of distant stuff out there. Okay. Now, as you've heard, there are many different versions of Mach's principle. Indeed, this.
Why? I already know. I already know why. Because when we push on something, we're going to get a pushback. So if we push on the 0 point energy, we're going to get a pushback as well. Just like plucking a guitar string. You pluck the guitar string and you're going to get a reaction. So what are we doing? We're plucking our guitar string. On what? On space-time, on the 0 point energy. We're plucking the guitar string on it. And then we're going to get our reaction. Bloop. Zapped right out of space-time. That's what's happening with the plane.
Subtlety of the distinctions in some cases becomes almost illusory and all that. And people used to fight about this quite vehemently at times. Okay. But general relativity in disguise. Okay. In a few lines showed in a vector theory of gravitation, which is a
this?
Okay. But this guy here, in his doctoral work with Paul Dirac back in the early 1950s, that's Dennis Sciama, who died about 5 years ago. Okay. In a few lines showed in a vector theory of gravitation, which is of course only approximation to general relativity, but nonetheless, you know, at the time Sciama thought it wasn't general relativity. It's turned out that it is general relativity in disguise. Okay, it turns out that if you take the gravito-electric field to be the analog of the electric field in electrodynamics, and then you ask what A is, the vector part of the form potential for the gravitational field, A turns out to be the integral of matter currents over all space and all that. Sciama used a neat trick here so that you don't get involved in lengthy, tedious calculations involving lots of algebra. Okay? He said, hey, look, if you look at an object and it's being accelerated, it looks to that object as if the universe is rigidly being accelerated in the opposite direction. Okay? So you can take V out of the integral here, and all you have to do is integrate over the matter density.
So he's saying now that, look, if you accelerate something this direction, it looks from the other perspective like everything's being pulled away from it. So what he's saying is you can treat everything as being interconnected. You can treat everything as being interconnected all the time. That is a huge revelation because we see everything as being separated. But if we see everything as being interconnected, aka entanglement, then this opens the door to an object being in one location or a different location. Because at the end of the day, you're just pulling on the fabric. You're creating one of those bridges that I was talking about before, like this. Bridge. By the way, this is the other thing I forgot, is that space-time is flat. This has been proven. You're going to go, wait, how can space-time be flat? We're living in a three-dimensional reality. I don't really know what to tell you. It's flat. Guaranteed it's flat. It's flat just like this is how we're creating our wormhole. We only see the flat surface. This is how they're creating the wormhole. They're stitching together 2 points through an extra dimension. Our space-time is flat. The answer is geometry is what they're doing. Geometry is the solution to all of the problem or all of the issues.
Okay. When you do the integration over the map, factor in front of it, fewer scads of people who don't care and all the rest of that, and they don't get it, then of course
here's all the math,
no progress
blah,
is
blah,
made. Okay, neutral method in theories that coupled gravity and electromagnetism in ways other than the naive Einstein-Maxwell equations. Okay, one of those was a suggestion by Arthur Schuster back around the turn of the 20th century, which had been followed up by Patrick Blackett in 1947.
We're going to skip ahead past special relativity. Special relativity is going to go back to the time stuff that we already spoke about. So the idea that you potentially cannot violate the past. So let's skip ahead and jump to the equation.
Pointed out that it makes some predictions if treated in a fairly straightforward and naive way that are dubious, to say the least. Okay, what you end up with is this equation, and notice that it has 2 parts. The linear term, which is the one that he was talking about, produces enormous effects. You can engineer situations where you can get really, in principle. In practice, this turns out to be a different matter. But in principle, you can produce very large effects with that term. Indeed, so large that if you can figure out how to do it right, you can make thrusters that you should be able to sell to NASA because you're not blowing any propellant out the tailpipe. You're gravitationally coupling directly to the rest of the universe, and so on and so forth. You have to put energy in to do this, but you don't have to worry about carrying along a lot of stuff.
So what he's saying here is that if this works, if these equations are correct, everyone says, show me the math. Well, there's the math right there. They're saying that if this works, we are coupling to space-time itself. We're in a medium, we're stuck. Like, we are constantly connected to the ocean. We are in the ocean all the time. It's constantly touching us. If we can break that coupling, if we can change that coupling, now we can be anywhere. If we manipulate that coupling, I can technically be accelerating faster than the speed of light without moving. What he's saying is that we can make a travelator like you have in the airports where you stand on it and it just goes. Just like that. That's what he's saying. Why? Because space-time's a medium. So we're manipulating the medium and we can change the geometry of the medium. And now I'm just going to be moving automatically without even moving myself. This is how a warp drive and a wormhole are both possible. You're changing the geometry of space-time. You are manipulating time and space. You're manipulating gravity, technically.
That goes out the tailpipe. Okay. What I want to emphasize today, however, is this term. Oops, I keep pushing the wrong button. This term here. Notice that it's smaller by a factor of c squared than this thing here.
Yes. Also, if you're one of those filthy casuals who doesn't walk on the Travelator, how dare you? How dare you?
Coefficient of the power terms. P is a power, IV, for a capacitor or something like that. This, by the way, is not voltage, that's the volume. Notice that the first term is independent of the volume of whatever you're doing, but this one turns out to be a density. So you have to get high densities in order to make this term large.
So we need high density electromagnetism. We're looking at voltage here. So they've connected electromagnetism to gravity. And they're saying through electromagnetism, by manipulating space-time with electromagnetism, we can manipulate gravity. In fact, it's called space-time metric engineering, and Hal Puthoff should have won a Nobel Prize for it, but we're still waiting for that to happen. If people are winning Nobel Prizes for dark energy, then Hal Puthoff definitely should deserve a Nobel Prize for space-time metric engineering, because this is the basis for it right here. Polarizing the vacuum is electrifying the vacuum. That's what we're looking at right here. They're saying we can electrify the vacuum and make a wormhole. Why? Because 0-point energy is electromagnetic in nature. I mean, holy shit, guys. This interview is from 2011. This is from 2011, guys. This is 14 years ago, man. If you're watching this, you're on the cutting edge. The people that were listening to this presentation, most of them had no idea what was being discussed. That's how far long ago this was from a scientific perspective.
The really interesting thing about this term is that there's a minus sign in front of it and everything else is squared or positive. Okay, that means that term is always negative. Okay, and as a result, we call it the wormhole term, me and my group of virtual over-the-shoulder lookers. Okay,
The term on the right is always negative because you're squaring it and then there's a minus sign.
It turns out you can do a crude numerical integration, and you discover that with reasonable assumptions that you can transiently, by cycling the first term here, so that rho 0, which occurs in the denominator of these coefficients, can be driven to 0. And when the coefficient is 0 in the denominator, the coefficient becomes infinite, of course, formally. That means that this term here, normally a factor of c squared smaller than the leading term, dominates the equation. And in principle, you ought to be able, if there's anything to all of this. Okay.
So there it is. That's the math. Okay, so there's the math right there, guys. So the math, they're saying we can manipulate c squared. C squared is the speed of light. C squared is the big problem. It's a big number. So c squared makes this all a big problem for us because you're multiplying by c squared, and that's in the denominator. So that makes the number very, very, very small. Right? 1 divided by c squared is a small, small number. But look at this. We've got our rho 0 over here. So rho 0, if we make rho 0 a very small number, close to 0, that changes everything. If c squared becomes 0 or close to 0, now that changes our equations entirely. Now this becomes almost infinite. So this is why, guys, the math is so important, because when you look at the math, you go, wait a minute. If this number starts to approach 0, all of a sudden the whole issue of the speed of light is not a problem anymore. It's not a problem anymore. This is what Einstein realized. This is why Einstein came up with the idea of an Einstein-Rosen bridge. He looked at his own equations and went, wait a minute. If I take this to its extreme, we should be able to do some pretty weird stuff with space-time. There it is. That's the math.
In principle, you ought to be able to make idiotic amounts of negative rest mass matter, that is to say, your Jupiter masses, in reasonable sized structures. And since this is a process which is induced in situ, you don't have to worry about collecting a bunch of stuff and trying to compact it down into your 30-meter in diameter sphere.
There's one more Yahtzee coming, guys, and then we're done for tonight. Wait for it.
It's already there, because you and me and everything else in the world has this lurking inside of our elementary particles. The negative rest mass is already there. Okay. Okay. Now,
negative rest mass is already there. The negative rest mass is already there everywhere. He's saying all we have to do is create an inversion, and we get the negative energy that we've been needing this whole time. He's saying the same thing that I've been saying in the last couple of years, which is it's a conceptual problem. The problem of negative energy is a conceptual problem of us not understanding what negative energy is. If you don't understand the nature of the universe, you don't understand what negative energy means, of course you can never produce a wormhole or a warp drive. If you don't understand what fire is, you're never going to be able to produce a stove either.
the question is there anything to this at all? And the answer to that question is, if it doesn't get supported by experiments, convincing experiments, the answer is nobody's going to pay any attention to it. They may not pay any attention to it anyway, but that's their problem, not yours. My problem is to see if there's anything to this at all. And indeed, following this is from an earlier presentation where I was talking about small steps and all that, but I'll show it to you anyway. Okay. What you do is you try and induce a fluctuation and push on the object when you're making the thing a little bit more massive and pull back on it when it's a little bit less massive. This is the linear analog of York's wheel. Okay, fair enough? Fair enough. Okay. This is Nembo Boldrini's animation for a presentation that he did that I got from him. Okay? It's really much cleverer than anything I could have come up with. Okay? Is there any evidence?
I want to just read those slides. I thought he read them here, but he doesn't. It says inertial reaction forces should be understood as being due to the action of the gravitational field of all matter in the cosmos on the local accelerated object. This is Mach's principle. If the internal energy of objects accelerated by external forces change, a relativistic calculation leads to the prediction that the masses of those objects transiently change during the acceleration. Such mass fluctuations can be employed to produce thrust without the ejection of normal material propellant. One merely pushes on an object with the fluctuating mass when it is more massive and pulls back on it when it is less massive. Okay.
This is Nembo Baldrini's animation for a presentation that he did.
Then at the bottom it says, what if you can make the mass of a capacitor fluctuating and act on it in a direction when it is heavier and in the opposite direction when it is lighter?
That I got from him. Okay, it's really much cleverer than anything I could have come up with. Okay, is there any evidence at all that suggests that this might be right? Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit. And how am I doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes quickly. Okay, the experiment that I'm working on now implements an idea of a former graduate student of mine, which is basically to take some active material which are going to drive with an alternating voltage, which will produce a sort of internal energy fluctuations that should produce mass fluctuations when they coincide with an acceleration, a mistake.
Alternating fluctuation of current, of voltage to produce a mass fluctuation? Okay, now this is sounding really, really familiar. Guys, I don't know if you've seen the graphs of the videos, but the way the orbs are spinning around the plane in the MH370 videos is a 120-degree 0-point sinusoidal pattern. Sinusoidal pattern, aka spinning around the plane. Here it is. The way they're spinning around in this perfect sinusoidal pattern now has me wondering if they're causing a mass fluctuation in the airplane itself. The same way that is being described by Woodward in his experiment right here. If these things are actually causing the mass fluctuation, then them spinning around the plane like this might be that might be the explanation for what's triggering the wormhole effect. It's essentially just Mach's principle being applied at the macroscopic level. So if you go back to some of my old posts, you guys can find the graph that I have that shows perfect sinusoidal pattern of the orb spinning around the plane. Has to be a connection, in my opinion, to what he's saying right here. That's the final Yahtzee. I mean, look at this. This right here in the middle, you have active material, and then on this side, you have positive and minus charge. That's the orbs. That's the orbs around your object in the middle.
That we made, including myself, for a long time was to assume that you could just simply apply an AC voltage to a capacitor and you should induce mass fluctuation. If there isn't any bulk acceleration present, there's no mass fluctuation. And the reason why is because when you construct the equation to which you get the transient terms from, you assume that you're bulk accelerating a thing that has the energy change taking place. Okay, the other ends of the...
Some of it's a little beyond me. So the bulk acceleration, I can't quite understand other than to think that the plane either must be accelerating or maybe that's why the orbs converge on the plane at the last moment. It does seem like it must be some sort of magnetic pinch that they're doing on the plane, but ultimately we don't have all the answers.
These are also piezoelectric actuators in this case. They're
piezoelectric actuators as well. Why is piezoelectricity so important? Piezoelectricity, because when you squeeze on a piezoelectric material like quartz, what it does is it creates a dipole. When you squeeze the quartz, the reason why electricity comes out is because you're separating positive and negative charge. Anytime you separate positive and negative charge, you get electricity because that's where electricity comes from. So that's how they are doing the laser beam as well. They create the plasma laser and they create a separation of charge, and now you have direct energy conversion. You have direct energy conversion. The same way where if I were to squeeze on quartz, I can produce an electric charge from it. Direct energy conversion. So let me see. And also, just if anyone wants to see, here's another image that he shared of this, which this talks about the phase shift here. My guess is this is the basis, a very rudimentary basis for a wormhole protocol. But it's going to have to do with phase matching, presumably. Macroscopic phase conjugation, getting your waves to match up at one location or the other. So we've got more research to do, guys, on the wormholes. The last thing I want to review here with you guys tonight, this is some personal research that I did looking into the wormhole theory. I decided to take what I have already learned from the orbs, just throw it into AI and have it tell me about polyhedral wormhole configurations. So here's what it said. These are just a few random quotes that I took from it, guys. Said, some speculative models suggest that polyhedral geometries could correspond to quantized or discrete energy states in quantum gravity. By constraining the wormhole's throat to a polyhedral shape, the system may snap to a lower energy configuration akin to how quantum systems favor certain stable states. Wow. I can't believe the AI spit that out. It's basically saying that we're seeing a phase transition happen. When the orbs are converging, they reach a critical threshold, and then a phase transition happens. And then, boom, we see the blip. And then we see reality bounce back. So that was the first thing that it was saying. It was saying that it's possible that there is a lower energy state that is of the nature of reality. And once that threshold gets hit, boom, low energy phase transition. There it is. Next thing it says, the Casimir effect, a quantum phenomenon producing negative energy densities between closely separated plates, might be enhanced in a polyhedral configuration. A polyhedral wormhole throat, in theory, maximizes the surfaces where such negative energy is generated, reducing the external exotic matter needed. So it turns out the polyhedral wormhole configurations actually minimize the total amount of exotic matter required. That's exactly what we're looking for. We want to find the wormhole that uses the least amount of exotic matter, and it turns out that's exactly the one that we're looking at in our low energy phase transition in the MH370 videos. Next thing it says is John Archibald Wheeler's space-time foam concept suggested that at the Planck scale, space-time might resemble a frothy polyhedral structure. Wow. Wow. That's it, right? At the tiniest levels, there must be some geometry and structure, even at the smallest scales. And once they figured that out, they just had to figure out how to scale it up. Why are we seeing orbs flying around in weird geometrical shapes? They're flying around in geometrical shapes because they're mimicking the quantum scale. They're mimicking what they're seeing on the quantum level. And therefore, they're producing quantum effects at the macroscopic level. Why? Because the universe is scale invariant. What can be done on the small scales can be done on the large scales. The same geometries that we see on the large scales, we can see on the small scales too. Wow. A polyhedral throat could approximate a low energy configuration by aligning with the natural grain, quote unquote, of space-time at microscopic scales. So the polyhedral throat could be using the exact geometries that are used in the tiniest scales and just scaling it up. The other thing I want to point out is that there's clearly a connection to fusion reactions. Why? Because fusion reactions, what they were trying to do is control the ionic waves, control the plasma. If they can control the waves and have three waves perfectly cancel each other out, then you get that maximum amount of force at the central point. And that's what you want for fusion. The reason why John Wheeler came up with his posed the polyhedral solution was the same exact reasons why they proposed a polyhedral solution to the wormholes as well. You put the energy at your points, your corners, and that ends up being one of the most efficient, if not the most efficient method. This is how they were able to focus the fission reactions into a center point to trigger the fusion reaction. And now we're seeing the same thing happen, but we're seeing it happen to an airplane, and we're seeing an aneutronic reaction. Once again, aneutronic reaction means no heat or little heat. There's very little destructive interaction that's happening. The most of the energy is being fed back into space-time as a gravitational potential. Couple more quotes here. Studies like those by Morris and Thorne, we saw that paper earlier in 1988, on traversable wormholes indirectly support this by showing the shape of the throat affects the exotic matter distribution. While they focused on spherical throats, polyhedral throats could be a natural extension in models prioritizing energy minimization. So it turns out polyhedral wormholes are the ones that minimize the negative energy requirement the most. We definitely nailed it. We have definitely nailed it. And then it says lower tidal forces. Symmetric polyhedral shapes might reduce extreme tidal forces, making the wormhole safer for traversal and less energetically costly to stabilize. If a fourth object is present, the three orbs around the plane plus the fourth could form a tetrahedron, the simplest platonic solid. The reason why I left that in there is because it is Terrence Howard who's been talking about the platonic solids, and I didn't even know what the hell that meant. Turns out it means shapes. Geometrical shapes is apparently what it means. So there you go. Little shout out to him. The polyhedral structure may encode the wormhole's topology, with the orb's position defining the vertices of a space-time tunnel. This could reduce the energy cost by aligning the wormhole with the natural geometry of space-time. In H-bombs, the implosion geometry, often spherical or cylindrical, is critical for fusion. Polyhedral configurations could theoretically enhance efficiency by optimizing pressure and energy distribution. The polyhedral arrangement amplifies this effect, concentrating negative energy at the tetrahedron's vortices to open the wormhole. And then lastly, the phase transition might involve a quantum gravity effect, where the polyhedral geometry triggers a topological shift, aka the wormhole throat, at a critical energy threshold. There it is, chat. Okay, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the live stream tonight. That was your Traversable Wormholes live stream, including James Woodward and John Kramer, some of the brightest minds out there, guys. We have narrowed it down to polyhedral wormhole geometries, closed loop teleportation protocols, non-retrocausal. You need to send your fourth orb to the destination in order to be able to get there. The United States is covering up fusion technology, practically free energy technology, I would call it. But like Tim Poole said, it's really a matter of efficiency, near perfect efficiency, energy production. And on Wednesday, we're going to talk about Eric Lerner, IEC fusion, plasmoids, and propulsion concepts as well. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you guys for being here, MH370X. I appreciate you guys. Keep being out there. Keep being truth tellers. Make sure everybody knows the truth. Let's change the world. Love you guys. Oh, let me make sure I do these last donations. Sorry, I want to hit these donos. Okay, last donations. Truth Teller, thank you very much, Truth Teller. The cracks in the dam are spreading. They are definitely spreading. We are seeing them spread like crazy, and they are panicking because they know that we are over the target, and they are afraid that they're going to lose narrative control. They are afraid they're going to lose narrative control. That's why you're seeing them encroaching upon our topics without talking to me, without wanting to talk to me, without bringing it up at all, is that they need to control the narrative. They need to steer people away from the United States government, hiding fusion, hiding energy research. And I wish them the best. They're screwed. We've got them dead to rights. Necro Google says, Kramer used the same vernacular as Kratsios. Yes, he did. Space-time manipulation, specifically distance annihilation. Yes, they did. Isn't it kind of weird they're using the exact same vernacular? Exact same vernacular. Not a mistake, guys. If you think that the president's speeches and his advising speeches aren't being edited dozens of times over and every word scrutinized, definitely are. And then Necrogoo, any plans for archive PDFs? Guys, all of what I've been researching is open source. It's all out there. There's nothing that I need to archive, that I need to save. It's all in the Discord. Links to everything are in the Discord. I have a secondary backup Discord. Everything you find is available. All my Twitter posts are out there with everything. You can search any of them. All the data is out there. Don't worry about that part, guys. Okay. Dude, I don't know. 5x5 News. I don't know what your deal is. I don't know why you've decided. I don't know if it's clout chasing or whatever you're doing, man. But like, I don't know if you've got some weird obsession thing going on or whatever. You didn't bring Lockheed into this. I don't know why you feel like you want credit, but I don't know, man. Just get over it. Just get over it, bro. The videos are real. If you don't want to be the last person to realize that the videos are real, so sooner you get over it, the better, brother. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. Oh, one more. My cat Japanese person. Things will fall into place. No need to be afraid. That's exactly my approach, guys. Things will fall into place. Just let things happen as they naturally do. I've already got a bunch of FOIAs out there, and now I know what they're hiding. It's really just a matter of time before the whole dam comes apart. So thank you, guys. Thank you, MH370X. Thank you in the Pilled chat as well. I appreciate you, Matt, and everybody else in the Pilled chat. And thank you, Rumble. Have a great night. Peace out, guys. Later. Let's go with this one.
Infrared eyes, scanning the black, tracking the heat, never turning back. Control 22, a covert gaze. Control 33, in the cosmic maze. Controls in the mix, secrets untold. Silent watchers, brave and bold. In the shadows, they silently glide, protecting our interest, far and wide. As Spears, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star. In the silence of space, they keep their post, shields unseen yet feared the most. With precision and speed, they warn of danger, keeping us safe from the missile's anger. As Beers, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star. Controls in the mix, secrets untold, silent watchers, brave and bold. In the shadows, they silently glide, protecting our interest, far and wide. As Beers, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star. As Beers, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared